As the airplane door closed, a tense silence hung over the first-class cabin. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, but Naomi Williams remained calm, her hand steady as she dialed a number on her phone. The man who had caused the scene, Michael Thompson, smirked from his seat, certain his complaints had been validated. His arrogance was palpable, each glance at Naomi dripping with disdain. But then, Naomi spoke into the phone, her voice a quiet force. "Yes, Daniel, it's me. I need assistance on Flight 225. You know what to do." She ended the call with a soft click, her expression never faltering. Minutes later, the captain's voice broke through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an incident, we will be returning to the gate. Authorities will be meeting us upon arrival." The word sent a ripple of confusion and curiosity through the passengers. Michael's smirk faded, replaced by a creeping uncertainty. When the plane docked, uniformed officials boarded swiftly. To everyone's shock, they walked straight past Naomi and stopped at Michael's seat. "Mr. Thompson, please collect your belongings and follow us," one of them said, their tone professional yet unyielding. "What? Me? There must be a mistake," Michael stammered, his bravado crumbling as passengers began to record the moment. He looked around for support, but all he saw were cold, unblinking stares. Naomi didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her one phone call had been to a powerful civil rights attorney with direct lines to the airline's legal team. Within minutes, the truth had been revealed. Michael's outburst, his discriminatory remarks, and his behavior had violated both airline policy and federal regulations. As he was led off the plane, his protests faded into the distance. Naomi remained seated, her calmness a stark contrast to the chaos she had just quietly orchestrated. The flight resumed, and as the cabin finally relaxed, a quiet but undeniable respect hung in the air. If this story moved you, if you've ever seen injustice and wanted to act, comment with a 1 below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of truth, justice, and redemption. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to light. Together, let's make a difference. The Miami International Airport buzzed with life, a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled conversations, and the rhythmic chime of departure announcements. Travelers hurried through the wide corridors, their faces a mosaic of emotions: excitement, impatience, and exhaustion. Sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, casting a golden hue over the bustling terminal. Flight 225 to San Francisco was preparing for boarding, and among the crowd was Naomi Williams, a poised and confident 42-year-old business consultant. Dressed in a tailored navy blue pantsuit, her appearance was the epitome of professional elegance. Naomi moved with a calm assurance, a quiet strength visible in every step. Her soft smile and polite nods to the airport staff reflected both her upbringing and her natural warmth. She was returning home after a successful business trip, eager to reunite with her family. Despite the chaos around her, Naomi exuded a serene composure, a quality she had cultivated over years of navigating high-stress environments. Her actions were deliberate, her interactions kind but concise. She thanked the gate attendant with a gentle voice as she accepted her first-class boarding pass, a well-deserved perk for a job well done. Just a few feet away stood Michael Thompson, a stark contrast to Naomi's composed demeanor. At 50 years old, Michael was a successful businessman, but where Naomi's confidence was inviting, his projected entitlement. His crisp gray suit and polished leather shoes were not just a sign of status, but a statement of superiority. His posture, with arms crossed and lips pursed, radiated impatience. His eyes darted around the terminal, not out of curiosity, but from a need to assess his surroundings, always seeking validation of his status. Michael had grown accustomed to a world where his demands were met without question, and any disruption to his expectations was met with immediate disdain. His interactions with the staff were transactional, his tone clipped and dismissive. When the gate agent informed him of a brief delay, he scoffed, muttering under his breath about incompetence. He glanced at Naomi as she walked past, his expression shifting from disinterest to thinly veiled contempt. "People like her," he mumbled, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, setting the stage for the conflict that was about to unfold. Jessica, a young flight attendant assigned to the first-class cabin, observed the exchange from the corner of her eye. This was only her second month on the job, and while she had been trained to handle difficult situations, nothing could fully prepare her for the complexities of human behavior. She had seen Michael's type before, passengers who wielded their status like a weapon, and it always made her stomach tighten. Her hands were steady as she adjusted the neatly pressed collar of her uniform, but inside she felt a growing unease. She had a knack for reading people, a skill honed from years of working in customer service, and the tension between Naomi and Michael was palpable. Jessica hoped the situation would resolve quietly, but her instincts told her otherwise. In the mix of it all was Maria Gonzalez, a middle-aged schoolteacher from Houston, sitting quietly at the gate. With kind eyes and a soft demeanor, Maria often found herself as an observer of the world around her. She noticed the way Michael's body language shifted when Naomi passed by. The rigid stance, the slight flaring of his nostrils, the dismissive flick of his eyes. She had seen this kind of behavior before, both in subtle and overt ways, and it always unsettled her. Maria believed in the power of standing up for what was right, but experience had taught her the risks of speaking out. So, for now, she remained silent, a quiet witness to the brewing storm. As the boarding call rang out, passengers began to line up, their tickets clutched in hand. Naomi moved forward with a gentle confidence, while Michael pushed his way through, brushing past a family with young children, not even acknowledging the frustrated glances they threw his way. Jessica took a deep breath and prepared to welcome the first-class passengers, hoping that her professional smile would be enough to diffuse whatever might come next. Little did any of them know, this ordinary boarding process was about to set the stage for an extraordinary story of dignity, injustice, and the quiet power of a well-placed phone call. Naomi stepped onto the plane, her heels clicking softly against the carpeted aisle as she moved with quiet confidence toward her assigned seat in first class. She adjusted her carry-on bag, offering a polite smile to the flight attendant who guided her to seat 3A. As she settled in, arranging her bag and slipping her phone into airplane mode, she caught the tail end of a muttered comment from a few rows back. Michael Thompson sat slouched in his seat, his eyes fixed on Naomi with a look of barely concealed disdain. "People like her," he grumbled, his voice low but not so quiet that it went unnoticed. The words hung in the air, sharp and jagged, sending a ripple of discomfort through the nearby passengers. Naomi heard him but chose not to react. Years of dealing with subtle and not so subtle prejudice had taught her the value of calmness. She had always believed that dignity spoke louder than confrontation. She shifted in her seat, smoothing the fabric of her blazer, and exhaled slowly, her composure unshaken. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering pre-flight beverages, and Naomi accepted a glass of water with a quiet "thank you." Meanwhile, Michael's irritation simmered. He craned his neck toward Jessica, the young flight attendant, his voice rising enough to cut through the gentle hum of the plane's preparations. "Excuse me," he called out. "I need you to move this woman. I paid for a first-class seat and I expect a certain level of comfort." His words were laced with entitlement, each syllable carefully crafted to assert dominance. Jessica, visibly taken aback, hesitated for a moment, her professional smile faltering. "Sir, all passengers in this cabin have been assigned their seats fairly," she replied, her tone polite but firm. Michael's face turned a shade redder. "Fairly? Look, I don't want to make a scene, but she needs to be moved, or better yet, taken off this flight entirely. I paid good money, and I won't tolerate this." His voice had grown louder, the sharpness of his tone drawing attention from all corners of the cabin. Passengers who had been quietly reading or settling in now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some glanced at Naomi, their expressions a mix of sympathy and caution, while others avoided eye contact altogether, hoping the situation would diffuse itself without further escalation. The atmosphere thickened, the easygoing pre-flight chatter replaced by a taut, uneasy silence. Naomi remained still, her posture unyielding yet graceful. She took a sip of her water, each movement slow and deliberate. Her calmness in the face of Michael's growing anger was a quiet defiance, a refusal to give him the reaction he so clearly sought. Jessica leaned in close to Naomi, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am so sorry about this. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make you more comfortable." Naomi offered a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you. I am perfectly fine right here." Her words were gentle but firm, a quiet declaration that she had no intention of moving. Michael let out a frustrated sigh, tossing his hands in the air theatrically. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "This is absolutely unacceptable." His outburst punctuated the silence, the echo of his voice hanging in the air long after he had finished speaking. Naomi's decision to stay calm was not born of passivity but of strategy. She knew that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred and ignorance was to maintain one's peace. Her mind was already at work, calculating her next move. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with practiced precision. She tapped a contact, bringing the device to her ear. Her voice remained soft, almost soothing as she spoke. "Hello, Daniel, it's Naomi. I need your help." Her choice to make the call then and there with Michael watching was no accident. She wanted him to see that she was not alone, that she had resources and support. She ended the call quickly, slipping the phone back into her bag, her expression unchanging. Naomi knew that real power lay not in volume, but in resolve. And as the plane's engines hummed to life, a sense of quiet anticipation filled the cabin. What would happen next remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: Naomi Williams was not going anywhere. Michael's patience snapped. He stood up abruptly, his knees bumping against the seat in front of him, causing the passenger there to jerk forward and shoot him an annoyed look. Ignoring it, Michael jabbed a finger in Naomi's direction, his face flushed and his voice sharp enough to slice through the murmurs of the cabin. "She doesn't belong here," he barked, his words hanging in the air like an echo of disdain. His outburst sent a ripple through the passengers, heads turning, eyes widening, the quiet hum of anticipation turning into a deafening silence. Naomi remained still, her expression a mask of calm, but the heat of his accusation prickled against her skin. Jessica, the young flight attendant, approached cautiously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, the edges of her professional smile quivering under the pressure. "Sir, please take your seat. We are preparing for takeoff," she said, her voice a practiced melody of calm. Michael turned on her, his presence suddenly towering over her petite frame. "Are you serious? I paid for a first-class experience. I expect to be surrounded by people who belong here, not—" His voice trailed off, the insinuation louder than any words he could have spoken. Jessica's expression tightened, a shadow of discomfort crossing her face as she struggled to maintain her composure. "Sir, all passengers in this cabin are here rightfully. I assure you, everything is in order," she said, her voice steady, but her knuckles pale as she gripped the edge of a seat to anchor herself. Michael leaned in, the space between them shrinking uncomfortably. "No, everything is not in order. I want this fixed. Now." His voice had dropped, becoming a dangerous whisper only Jessica could hear, a hiss of anger that threatened to unravel the fragile thread of peace. She hesitated, her training wrestling with her instincts. She had been taught to prioritize passenger comfort, but whose comfort mattered more? The man who was shouting, or the woman who sat quietly enduring his abuse? Her gaze flickered to Naomi, who met her eyes with a steady, reassuring look. It was a look that said, "I'm okay," even if the situation was far from it. Jessica's mind raced. She knew what the policy stated, knew the importance of maintaining order, but also felt the weight of justice pressing down on her. If she gave in to Michael's demands, if she asked Naomi to move, or worse, to leave, what message would that send? Her thoughts tumbled over each other, and for a moment the world narrowed to the three of them. The angry man, the poised woman, and the flight attendant caught in the middle. She swallowed hard, the decision crystallizing in her mind. "Sir, I need you to take your seat," immediately. "If you continue to disrupt the cabin, I will be forced to involve the captain," she said, her voice finding a firmer edge. Michael's expression twisted into disbelief, his lips parting as if to argue, but the sight of other passengers watching him, phones held low but undoubtedly recording, stopped him. His jaw clenched, and with a final glare at Naomi, he dropped into his seat, the impact rattling the tray table in front of him. Jessica exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, the weight of the moment settling over her. She straightened her uniform, nodded slightly to Naomi, and turned away, every step heavy with the knowledge that this confrontation was far from over. Naomi remained still as the turbulence of Michael's anger washed over her. Her face was a calm sea, not a ripple of emotion betraying the storm inside. She allowed the silence to linger for a moment, absorbing the weight of the stares and whispers surrounding her. With a steady hand, she reached into her bag, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She pulled out her phone, the smooth glass screen lighting up with a swipe of her thumb. She tapped on a contact, bringing the device to her ear, her expression unchanging. "Hello, Daniel. It's Naomi. I need assistance on Flight 225. She spoke softly, her voice measured and calm. There was no urgency, no panic, just a quiet firmness that spoke volumes more than raised voices ever could. As she continued to speak, her thumb moved with practiced ease, the camera app opening with a tap. She angled the phone subtly, the camera capturing Michael's flushed face, his tight-lipped scowl, and the uncomfortable shifting of passengers around him. Her phone's lens framed the scene with perfect clarity, the flight attendant's uncertain posture, the way Michael's fists clenched against his armrests, the way his eyes darted around, seeking validation and finding only unease. Naomi narrated in a low, steady tone, providing a timestamp and a brief explanation of what had transpired, ensuring that there would be no ambiguity about the events when this footage reached Daniel Lee. She ended the call with a quiet thank you and sent the video, watching as the progress bar completed and the confirmation popped up. Her connection to Daniel, a civil rights attorney with a sharp mind and a reputation for justice, was not just a safety net, but a lifeline. Throughout the entire process, Naomi's demeanor remained composed. Where Michael's aggression had been loud and brash, her response was controlled and precise. Her strategy was not to match his volume, but to document his actions, to create a record that could not be dismissed or twisted. She knew that a calm voice often held more power than a shouted demand, that a clear and methodical approach would cut through the chaos with undeniable clarity. Her strength lay not just in her silence, but in her preparation, in her understanding that true power often came not from speaking the loudest, but from being the most prepared. The passengers who had initially avoided her gaze now found themselves watching her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Her restraint created a mirror, reflecting Michael's ugliness back onto him, showing him for what he truly was without ever saying a word. Naomi did not need to defend herself openly, because every action she took spoke for her. The contrast between her and Michael could not have been more stark. Where he flailed, she stood firm. Where he raged, she remained serene. As she tucked her phone away, Naomi's expression remained unchanged, a quiet resolve shimmering beneath her calm exterior. She had set her plan into motion, and now all she had to do was wait. The pieces were in place, and soon Michael would realize that his actions had consequences far beyond this plane. Jessica moved down the aisle, her steps small and careful, the polished black shoes of her uniform barely making a sound against the carpet. Her face remained composed, but beneath the surface, a storm of uncertainty raged. She had been trained to handle difficult passengers, to de-escalate conflicts with a soft voice and a practiced smile. But this situation was different. It was not just about an uncomfortable seat or a missing blanket. This was raw, real, and threaded with a tension that cut deeper than typical in-flight disputes. She paused by Naomi's seat, leaning in close enough that her words would not carry beyond them. "I'm so sorry. This shouldn't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to steady it. Naomi offered a small, reassuring smile, a gesture that seemed almost backward given the circumstances. "Thank you, but I'm okay," Naomi replied, her calmness a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. Jessica's mind raced through her options. She had seen the way Michael's face had twisted with anger, how his voice had grown sharp and accusatory. If she took a firm stand against him, would he escalate further? Would he complain to the airline, threaten her job, cause a scene that would ripple far beyond this flight? And yet, if she did nothing, if she allowed his behavior to go unchallenged, what kind of message would that send? Not only to Naomi, but to every passenger watching. Her training whispered one thing: keep the peace, prioritize safety, follow protocol. But her conscience whispered another. She thought of her own experiences, of the small, subtle moments where prejudice had brushed against her life, and felt a pang of empathy for Naomi. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the seat back, a small physical grounding as she made her decision. She would not ask Naomi to move. She would not give in to Michael's demands. Whatever the fallout, she knew deep down that doing the right thing mattered more than the immediate discomfort of this confrontation. She straightened her posture, a quiet resolve settling over her, and turned away to signal to her colleagues for support. The choice had been made, and with it came a fragile but unwavering sense of strength. Whatever happened next, she knew she had chosen integrity over convenience, and that, in itself, felt like a victory. Maria Gonzalez sat a few rows behind, her hands resting on a well-worn canvas bag that held lesson plans and books for the weekend ahead. As a middle school teacher, Maria had spent years helping young minds understand fairness, respect, and empathy. She had seen playground squabbles and classroom disputes, but what unfolded before her on this flight felt heavier, more insidious. Her heart ached as she watched Michael's anger rise, his words sharp and hurtful, the venom in his voice unmistakable. When Naomi remained calm, showing strength through her quiet resolve, Maria felt a surge of admiration. She caught Naomi's eye, offering a small, gentle nod of support, a silent but powerful gesture that said, "I see you, I stand with you." It was a brief moment, barely noticeable to anyone else, but Naomi's slight nod in return acknowledged the connection. This shared look between two strangers became a thread of solidarity, a reminder that even in a room full of silence, there were allies. The atmosphere in the cabin hung in a delicate balance. Some passengers turned away, their discomfort manifesting as indifference. Others shifted uncomfortably, phones in hand, recording but not intervening. But in Maria's subtle gesture, there was hope. It was a reminder that not every act of resistance needed to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes, the strongest support came in quiet, unspoken alliances. Her small act was the first pebble in what would soon become a ripple of change. These moments remind us of the power of solidarity, of how even the smallest actions can make a profound impact. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where doing the right thing felt difficult? We'd love to hear your story. Sharing your experiences not only helps build a community of understanding, but also encourages others to find their voice. And if stories of strength and justice resonate with you, consider joining us by subscribing. Your support allows us to continue bringing powerful, real-life stories to light. Stories that inspire, challenge, and create change. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. A soft chime echoed through the cabin, followed by the captain's calm but firm voice over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a brief delay due to a situation requiring attention. Please remain seated while we address the matter. The announcement rippled through the passengers, their uneasy whispers rising and falling like waves against the steady hum of the aircraft. The subtle shift in tone, from pre-flight routine to an air of controlled tension, was palpable. A few minutes later, the front door of the aircraft opened, and two uniformed airline officials stepped on board. Their crisp white shirts and navy blazers, adorned with airline insignia, commanded an immediate sense of authority. The hum of conversation ceased, and a stillness settled over the cabin as they moved with purpose toward the first-class section. Michael's lips curled into a self-satisfied smirk, his body language shifting into a posture of confidence. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, as if expecting the cavalry to have finally arrived to restore the world to his version of order. His expression conveyed smugness, a readiness to watch Naomi escorted away, validating his perception of control. His eyes darted toward Naomi, a look of victory already settling into his features, and he prepared himself to bask in the satisfaction of being right. The officials stopped directly in front of Naomi's row, but instead of focusing on her, they turned to Jessica, the flight attendant, who had been standing nearby, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Miss, can you confirm the situation for us?" one of the officials asked, his tone professional yet stern. Jessica's voice remained steady as she described the events, her words careful but truthful, outlining the disruptive behavior and the concerns raised by other passengers. The second official nodded, his face a mask of impartiality, taking notes as she spoke. The shift in focus began to unsettle Michael, his smirk fading as confusion knitted his brow. "Wait a minute," he interjected. "I'm the one who reported the issue, she's the problem. I paid for first class, and I expect to be treated properly." His voice cracked, a mix of indignation and growing fear. One of the officials turned to him, his expression hardening. "Sir, we have received multiple reports regarding your behavior. You've disrupted the flight and created an unsafe environment for both passengers and crew. We need you to collect your belongings and exit the aircraft immediately." The statement dropped into the silence, like a stone into still water. The shockwaves visible on Michael's face as his confidence crumbled, his mouth opened and closed, words failing him as reality set in. "You've got to be kidding me," he stammered, looking around as if expecting someone to defend him. The passengers remained silent, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Michael's defeat was not just procedural, but deeply personal, the realization that his behavior had backfired in the most public of ways. As he stood, fumbling with his bag, his movements were jerky, all pretense of composure lost. The irony was unmistakable. He had believed the officials were his allies, only to find that he was the one being removed. Naomi remained composed, her expression unchanging, a quiet power emanating from her, as the plane's door closed behind Michael, leaving his echo of indignation behind. The two airline officials stood in the narrow aisle, their presence commanding immediate attention. The taller of the two, a man with silver thread hair and a calm, authoritative demeanor, looked directly at Naomi. His voice was clear, carrying a weight of professionalism that left no room for misinterpretation. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his tone gentle but deliberate. His question hung in the air, a sharp contrast to the aggressive demands that had filled the space moments earlier. Naomi met his gaze, her expression serene, a quiet nod acknowledging both his question and the support it represented. The subtle shift in focus sent a ripple through the cabin. What had been a stage for Michael's theatrics now became a platform for accountability. Michael's smirk dissolved, his confidence slipping through his fingers like sand. He blinked, his mouth slightly open, as if the words forming in his head could not find their way out. "Excuse me?" he managed to sputter, his voice a fractured echo of its former bravado. His body tensed, the bravado drained from his posture as he realized the tide had turned against him. His disbelief was palpable, each passing second stripping away the layers of arrogance he had worn so openly. "Wait, no, this is wrong. I'm the one who complained. She's the problem. I paid for first class. I deserve better than this." His voice climbed in pitch, the bravado replaced with a thread of desperation. The second official, a woman with a no-nonsense expression and a badge that marked her as a senior manager, maintained her firm stance. "Sir, we have received multiple reports from passengers and crew regarding your disruptive behavior. You are in violation of our airline's policies concerning passenger conduct and safety. We are asking you to gather your belongings and deplane immediately." Her words were crisp and final, the kind of tone that allowed no room for negotiation. She did not raise her voice, but the clarity of her statement cut through the cabin's air, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Michael's face shifted through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, anger, disbelief, each expression more raw than the last. His hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with his bag, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice breaking. "You can't do this. I'm not going anywhere." But even as he spoke, his body betrayed him, his instinct to comply overriding his fading resistance. The officials stood their ground, their expressions unyielding. Passengers who had been watching quietly now held their breath, a collective anticipation building as the scene unfolded. As Michael finally rose from his seat, the reality of his situation settled in. His steps were heavy, the weight of his actions pressing down on him as he moved down the aisle. The whispers started softly, the muted hum of justice being recognized. Naomi remained still, her calm presence a stark reminder of the strength it took to remain composed in the face of such open hostility. The officials did not gloat, their professionalism a silent testament to the authority of truth over arrogance. Michael's exit from the plane was not just a physical removal, but a symbolic purging of the prejudice he had brought with him. The door closed behind him with a definitive thud, and the cabin exhaled as one. The kind of collective breath that only comes after the air has been cleared. As the door to the plane closed behind Michael, a palpable shift rippled through the cabin. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted, allowing the air to move freely again. Some passengers let out quiet sighs of relief, their shoulders visibly relaxing as the tension ebbed away. Those who had watched the confrontation with clenched jaws and stiff postures now softened, their expressions transforming from apprehension to gratitude. The elderly couple in row 5 exchanged a glance, a quiet acknowledgement that what they had just witnessed was more than a mere incident. It was a moment of truth. The businessman across the aisle, who had pretended to be engrossed in his laptop, now sat back, his face a mixture of embarrassment for not speaking up sooner and respect for those who had. Maria Gonzalez, who had offered her silent nod of support earlier, felt a surge of warmth spread through her chest. She had seen injustice before, had taught her students about the importance of standing up against it, but rarely had she seen such a clear and immediate example of accountability. She found her voice steady and strong as she spoke into the newly calm air. "This is what accountability looks like." Her words were simple but resonant, echoing the unspoken sentiment of many. Heads turned toward her, some nodding in agreement, others offering soft, supportive smiles. Her statement hung in the air, a reminder that justice, when it arrives, often does so with quiet dignity. Jessica, the young flight attendant, stood by the galley, her hands trembling as she tried to steady the glass of water she had been holding. She had braced herself for the worst, had prepared to navigate a fallout where the aggressor walked away unscathed and the victim bore the burden. But now, as she witnessed the rightful outcome unfold before her, she felt a well of emotion rise within her. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of release. She blinked rapidly, a soft laugh escaping her lips as a tear rolled down her cheek. One of her colleagues reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "You did good," they whispered, and Jessica's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and pride. She had made the right choice. She had stood by the truth, and it had mattered. The sense of solidarity extended through the cabin, a quiet but profound acknowledgement that each person had played a role, whether by speaking out, recording the incident, or simply bearing witness to the truth. Even those who had remained silent now felt a stir within them, a nudge toward courage for the next time they might find themselves at such a crossroads. As the plane began to taxi, the hum of the engines underscored the new atmosphere. One not of fear, but of resilience. Naomi remained seated, her expression serene, the embodiment of grace under pressure. The flight continued, but for everyone on board, the journey had already transformed into something far more meaningful than a mere trip from one city to another. As Michael stumbled down the aisle, his belongings clutched tightly in his fists, a quiet hum of phones filled the air. Passengers held their devices low, capturing the final moments of his departure with the steady, unblinking gaze of their cameras. It was not an act of defiance in the traditional sense. No voices were raised, no hands pointed, but the act of recording became its own form of protest. Each click of a record button was a silent testament, a promise that the truth of what happened would not be lost to the confines of the aircraft. Michael spun around near the front of the plane, his face a blotchy mix of red and white, his composure shattered. "You'll all regret this," he shouted, his voice cracking. The threat hung in the air, an empty echo that seemed to diminish him further. His words, meant to instill fear, only solidified the resolve of those watching. Where his aggression had once filled the cabin, now there was only the quiet defiance of passengers who refused to look away. Their phones remained steady, each one a small glowing shield against his bluster. The contrast between his desperate outburst and their silent resistance painted a powerful image, a collective strength that required no words. As the door finally closed behind him and the plane began to move, a soft chime signaled another announcement. The captain's voice broke through the silence, his tone calm, yet unyielding. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. As we continue our journey, I want to make it clear that discrimination and harassment have no place on our flights. Your safety and dignity are our top priorities, and we will always act to protect them." His words were a balm, soothing the raw edges left by Michael's behavior. The message was more than a statement, it was a promise. He did not mention Michael by name, did not recount the specifics of the incident, but his intention was clear. The captain's voice held the weight of authority, each word precise and deliberate, setting a precedent that this airline would not tolerate injustice in any form. A ripple of quiet approval moved through the cabin. Passengers who had been holding their breath seemed to exhale as one, a unified release of tension. Jessica, the flight attendant, allowed a small smile to escape, the captain's words validating her choice to stand by Naomi. Maria Gonzalez closed her eyes briefly, feeling a sense of closure. Her whispered "Amen," a soft echo of gratitude. The plane continued to taxi, the runway stretching ahead as a fresh start, not just for the journey to San Francisco, but for everyone on board. The captain's message had transformed a moment of discord into one of unity, setting a tone that resonated far beyond the confines of the aircraft. The story of what happened on Flight 225 was already being shared, not just through videos and social media posts, but through the quiet resolve of those who had witnessed it firsthand. As the plane settled into cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, offering a soft, calming glow. Naomi sat still, her composure as unshakable as ever. The turbulence of the earlier incident had passed, but she could sense the lingering unease around her. She knew the passengers needed closure, needed to understand what had just happened and why it mattered. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, the gentle motion drawing the eyes of those nearby. Clearing her throat softly, she spoke, her voice both gentle and resolute. "I just want to thank everyone for your patience today. I know what happened was uncomfortable, but this isn't just about me. It's about all of us standing up to hate, standing up for what is right." Her words flowed with the ease of truth, each sentence a balm over the frayed nerves of the cabin. She continued, "When I realized where this situation was headed, I reached out to a friend of mine, Daniel Lee. He's a civil rights attorney. I wanted to make sure this was handled the right way, not just today but moving forward." The mention of legal support sparked a wave of understanding through the passengers. Heads nodded subtly, a few quiet, "good-for-you" murmurs rippling through the rows. Naomi's revelation wasn't about seeking sympathy, but about showing strength and preparation. Her decision to act quickly and decisively had not only protected her, but had also sent a message that injustice would not be met with silence. She sat down, a soft smile gracing her lips as the energy in the cabin shifted toward solidarity. Meanwhile, outside the contained world of the airplane, the story of what had transpired on Flight 205 was already taking on a life of its own. Videos of Michael's outburst had made their way to social media, the crisp clarity of smartphone footage capturing his entitlement and Naomi's grace. Within hours, the videos had been shared thousands of times, sparking discussions on accountability and prejudice. The internet, with its unblinking eye, had become the ultimate arbiter of truth. Soon, Michael's identity emerged, not just a nameless passenger but a mid-level executive at a prominent tech firm. His face, twisted with anger in the videos, was now paired with LinkedIn profiles and professional histories. The backlash was swift and severe. His employer, keenly aware of the public relations nightmare unfolding, issued a statement. "We do not tolerate discriminatory behavior. Effective immediately, this individual is no longer employed with us." The announcement sent shockwaves through online communities, a clear example of how actions, once hidden in the privacy of closed doors or quiet planes, now carried consequences far beyond their origin. The digital age had turned the lens of justice outward, giving a voice to those who might otherwise remain unheard. As Naomi leaned back in her seat, her phone buzzed softly with a text from Daniel. "It's everywhere. You did it." She didn't need to open the message to know the truth. She had stood up, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And now, the world was listening. In the days that followed, the impact of what happened on Flight 225 rippled far beyond the cabin. The airline, under public scrutiny, moved quickly to address the situation. A formal statement was released, acknowledging the incident and committing to change. "We are implementing new anti-discrimination policies, including mandatory diversity training for all staff," the statement read. The announcement was more than just damage control. It was a promise to do better. The airline outlined plans for clear protocols when dealing with harassment and prejudice, setting a precedent not just for their company, but potentially influencing industry standards. The new policies included zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior, and a dedicated hotline for reporting incidents in real time, ensuring that no passenger would ever feel unsupported again. Naomi's story became a catalyst for a broader conversation. On social media, the hashtag #FlyWithDignity started to trend. Passengers who had been on the flight shared their experiences, not only from that day but from past encounters where they had felt uncomfortable or unsafe. The stories ranged from subtle microaggressions to overt discrimination, each adding a layer to the unfolding narrative. What started as a singular moment of courage blossomed into a movement. News outlets picked up the story, and Naomi found herself at the center of a national dialogue about accountability and respect. Her inbox filled with messages from strangers thanking her, sharing how her bravery had inspired them to stand up in their own lives. Daniel Lee, the civil rights attorney, helped her draft an open letter to the airline industry at large, calling for standardized anti-discrimination training and transparent complaint processes. The letter gained traction, signed by advocacy groups and supported by lawmakers who recognized the opportunity to push for systemic change. Naomi's quiet strength had become a rallying point, showing how a single moment of standing firm could create waves of progress. What had begun as an uncomfortable and unjust encounter on a plane had transformed into a force for good. Naomi didn't just reclaim her space that day. She helped carve out a safer, more inclusive space for everyone. Naomi sat at a round table in a modest but bustling office space in downtown San Francisco. The walls were adorned with posters bearing messages of unity and equality, bold letters overlaid on vibrant images of diverse communities standing together. Daniel Lee stood at the whiteboard, outlining the next steps for their newly formed advocacy group, Equal Spaces. It had been just a few weeks since the incident on Flight 225, but the momentum had not slowed. What began as a single moment of injustice had blossomed into a full-fledged movement, and Naomi found herself not only at the center of it, but leading the charge. Equal Spaces aimed to promote equality and respect in public places, airlines, businesses, schools, anywhere that people gathered. The group's mission was clear: to educate, to advocate, and to hold institutions accountable for creating safe and inclusive environments for everyone. Naomi had never seen herself as an activist before. Her professional life had always been defined by quiet achievements, building her consulting career with a blend of hard work and humility. But the events on the plane had ignited something within her, a realization that her voice could be a powerful tool not just for herself, but for those who struggled to be heard. Her transformation from business consultant to advocate was not a complete shift in who she was. but rather an evolution, an expansion of the principles she had always held close: integrity, respect, and courage. She found herself speaking at community meetings, sharing her story not as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. Her speeches were not rehearsed or polished, but they resonated because they were real. She spoke of the fear and frustration of being singled out, of the strength it took to remain calm, and of the profound impact of even the smallest acts of support, like the nod from Maria Gonzalez, that had helped her hold steady. Daniel often stood by her side at these events, providing legal insights and helping to outline practical steps that businesses and organizations could take to implement anti-discrimination policies. Together, they became a dynamic duo. Naomi with her lived experience and heartfelt message, Daniel with his legal expertise and strategic thinking. They built a team, including Jessica, the flight attendant, who had shown such integrity that day. Jessica's involvement added another layer to their mission, demonstrating how allies in difficult situations could make all the difference. Equal Spaces started organizing workshops and partnering with businesses to create training programs that went beyond the basics of customer service and delved into understanding unconscious bias and fostering empathy. Naomi's new role brought her into rooms she had never expected to be in: boardrooms, schools, even a congressional hearing where she testified about the need for federal guidelines on anti-discrimination practices in public spaces. She had become a voice for many, not by changing who she was, but by amplifying what she had always believed in. Her advocacy was not about seeking revenge or pushing an agenda, but about creating a world where dignity was the default, where no one had to make a phone call to feel safe in a public space. Naomi's journey showed that transformation through adversity was not just about surviving, but about finding the strength to turn a painful experience into a powerful force for change. She had turned a moment of injustice into a movement of equality, proving that sometimes the quietest voices could lead the loudest change. Michael Thompson sat alone in a dimly lit coffee shop, his fingers wrapped tightly around a lukewarm cup of black coffee. The once crisp lines of his tailored suits had been replaced by the rumpled edges of a worn jacket, his polished shoes swapped for scuffed sneakers. His phone lay on the table, face down, its screen black and silent. Each notification felt like a threat, a reminder of the world outside this dim refuge, a world where his name had become a cautionary tale. He had lost his job within days of the flight incident. His company had acted swiftly, issuing a public statement condemning his behavior, distancing themselves from him with cold corporate efficiency. The termination letter had been concise, a single page that unraveled decades of career building. His office belongings had been delivered to his doorstep in a box with a generic label, as if he had never been more than a name on an employee roster. The digital world was unrelenting. Videos of his outbursts circulated endlessly, his face and his words shared millions of times, dissected by commentators and casual viewers alike. His LinkedIn profile had been flooded with comments, some expressing disappointment, others offering scathing critiques. He had deactivated his social media accounts, but not before catching glimpses of hashtags like "Accountability Matters" and "Justice for Naomi." Job applications went unanswered. He had once been a sought-after executive, headhunters calling him regularly, but now his phone remained silent. He attended a few interviews, only to see the same tight-lipped smiles from hiring managers who politely ended the conversation early. His resume, once a ticket to new opportunities, had become a liability. His past achievements overshadowed by a single viral mistake. The fallout was not just professional. His personal life began to fray at the edges. Old friends hesitated to return his calls, their responses peppered with thin excuses and strained politeness. His regular spots, the gym, his favorite restaurant, no longer felt welcoming. Conversations hushed when he walked by, and he could feel the weight of stares, the quiet judgment pressing down on him. Michael's arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a man unmoored, grappling with a reality where his status could not shield him. He spent long hours reflecting, replaying the moment on the plane over and over again, searching for a way to rewrite the ending in his mind. He had believed his actions would go unchecked, that his demands would be met, and his privilege would hold firm. Instead, he had become the example of what happens when prejudice and entitlement meet accountability. In the quiet of his small apartment, Michael scrolled through articles about Naomi's advocacy work. Each headline felt like a reminder that while he had fallen, she had risen. He saw the faces of the people she helped, heard the voices of those inspired by her strength, and for the first time, he felt the sting of true regret, not just for his lost status, but for the choices that had led him there. His story became a lesson, a stark reminder that in today's world, the consequences of one's actions could not only ruin a career, but also reshape a life. Naomi sat in a studio chair, the bright lights casting a soft glow on her calm, composed expression. Across from her, the interviewer adjusted his microphone, offering her a warm smile as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera blinked on, signaling that they were live. We're joined today by Naomi Williams, whose story on Flight 225 not only captured national attention, but also sparked a broader movement for equality in public spaces. Naomi, thank you for being here. Naomi nodded, her voice steady as she responded, "Thank you for having me. It's important to keep this conversation going." The interviewer leaned forward, his curiosity genuine. "Since that day on the plane, your advocacy group, Equal Spaces, has made real strides. What do you think is the most important message people should take away from your story?" Naomi took a breath, her hands resting gently in her lap. "For me, it all comes down to this. Change starts when we refuse to be silent. The day I sat on that plane, I could have just stayed quiet, tried to avoid conflict, but I knew that my silence would only enable the behavior. Standing up wasn't just about me. It was about setting an example that everyone deserves respect and dignity." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "I want people to know that their voices matter. Whether you've experienced discrimination firsthand or witnessed it happening to someone else, sharing your story can make a difference. It's through these stories, these honest conversations, that we start to break down barriers and create real, lasting change." Her words resonated, not only with those in the room, but with the viewers watching from their homes. The interview cut to a clip of her work with Equal Spaces, showing Naomi leading a workshop, her voice guiding a room full of people through discussions about empathy, respect, and accountability. The camera returned to Naomi, who offered a gentle but powerful call to action. "I encourage everyone watching. If you have a story to share, do it. If you see injustice, speak up. And if you don't know how to help, ask." There are so many ways to get involved, and every small action contributes to a larger movement. The interviewer's expression softened, clearly moved by her message. "You've turned a difficult situation into an opportunity for growth, not just for yourself, but for so many others. What's next for you and Equal Spaces?" Naomi smiled, a quiet strength in her eyes. "We're expanding our programs, working with businesses and schools to ensure that inclusivity is not just a policy but a practice. Our goal is to create environments where everyone feels safe and valued. It's a big challenge, but I believe that with enough voices, we can make it happen." As the interview wrapped up, Naomi's words lingered in the air. Her message was not just a recounting of past events, but a living, breathing call to action. She had taken a moment of injustice and transformed it into a movement, inviting everyone to be a part of the change. The cameras turned off, but the impact of her words continued, reaching far beyond the studio, rippling out into the world where change was not just a possibility. As the final scene unfolded, the camera gently panned across a serene view of the San Francisco skyline, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting warm hues over the city. Naomi stood by the large window of the Equal Spaces office, her silhouette framed by the golden light. Her expression was thoughtful, a quiet moment of reflection amidst the whirlwind of change she had helped set in motion. Her voice, calm yet powerful, filled the space as she turned to the camera, speaking directly to the audience. "What would you do if you witnessed injustice? Would you stand up? or stay silent? The question lingered, both an invitation and a challenge, encouraging viewers to look inward and consider their own choices. Her words were not accusatory but hopeful, a reminder that every person held the potential to make a difference, no matter how small their actions might seem. The screen faded to black, but the echo of her question remained, a gentle nudge to carry the conversation beyond the confines of the video. A soft, instrumental melody began to play as the narrator's voice took over, wrapping up the story with a heartfelt message. Every voice matters. Every action counts. Naomi's story is a testament to the power of courage, not just in the moment, but in the lasting impact it can create. If this story inspired you, if it made you think about how you might act in a similar situation, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us bring more stories of strength, resilience, and change to light. And if you haven't already, subscribing is a simple way to stay connected with this growing community of voices standing up for what's right. The tone was warm and genuine, not a plea for engagement, but an invitation to be part of something meaningful. The message balanced gratitude with a call to action, blending seamlessly into the story's broader theme of empowerment and advocacy. In the final moments, the video shifted to a montage of real-world impact, clips of Equal Spaces workshops, testimonials from individuals who had found their voice through the organization, and snapshots of Naomi speaking at community events. The screen displayed a gentle prompt: share your story. Your voice could inspire someone else. Below, a comment section began to fill with messages of support, stories of similar experiences, and reflections from viewers moved by Naomi's journey. I've been in a similar situation and I stayed silent. This makes me want to do better next time, wrote one viewer. Another shared, I showed this to my kids. We talked about what it means to treat everyone with respect. Thank you for this. The sense of community was palpable, the space transforming into a safe haven for dialogue and support. The final frame settled on the Equal Spaces logo, a simple yet powerful image of intertwined hands of different colors, a symbol of unity and strength. The music softened, leaving a moment of quiet before the video ended. The invitation to subscribe and share did not feel like an obligatory YouTube script, but like a natural extension of the conversation. It was a promise that by staying connected, viewers could continue to explore stories that not only entertained, but educated and inspired. As the screen turned dark, the last note hung in the air, a reminder that the story was not just about what happened on that plane, but about the movement it had sparked, and the conversations still to come. The story of Naomi Williams and Flight 225 is not just a narrative of a single incident, but a powerful tapestry woven with themes of accountability, courage, unity, and empowerment. At its core, the story demonstrates how actions, whether good or bad, have consequences that resonate far beyond the initial moment. Michael Thompson's public unraveling served as a stark reminder that prejudice and entitlement do not exist in a vacuum. His behavior on the plane led to swift and tangible repercussions, from the immediate expulsion from the flight to the long-term loss of his job and reputation. His downfall illustrated the truth that in a world increasingly connected by technology and social awareness, the consequences of one's actions can follow them closely, and often publicly. The story underscored an important lesson. Accountability is not about punishment alone, but about ensuring that harmful actions are met with appropriate responses, promoting a culture where respect and fairness are non-negotiable. Naomi's quiet strength throughout the ordeal showcased the profound impact of courage in the face of injustice. Her decision to remain calm, to document the incident, and to involve a civil rights attorney was not only a strategic move, but also a testament to her inner resolve. Naomi did not meet anger with anger. Instead, she chose a path of wisdom and strategy, understanding that true power often lies in a composed and thoughtful response. Her actions set a powerful example, showing that courage does not always need to be loud or confrontational. Sometimes, it is the quiet but unwavering stance that makes the most significant impact. Naomi's story encourages others to find their voice, to recognize that standing up for oneself can be a powerful catalyst for change, not just for the individual, but for society at large. The narrative also highlighted the strength found in unity and support. Small gestures, like Maria Gonzalez's nod of solidarity, might have seemed insignificant to some, but they played a crucial role in maintaining Naomi's composure and showing that she was not alone. Jessica, the flight attendant, also embodied this theme by choosing integrity over convenience. Standing firm despite the pressure to placate an aggressive passenger, these moments of quiet support illustrated how solidarity often manifests in subtle but meaningful ways. It showed that even when one cannot take direct action, offering support through acknowledgement and empathy can make a profound difference. The collective response of the passengers, the quiet filming of the incident, and the eventual applause after Michael's removal all contributed to a broader sense of communal justice, emphasizing that change is not the responsibility of a single person, but a shared commitment. Perhaps the most enduring theme of Naomi's story is empowerment. From a single phone call to establishing the Equal Spaces Advocacy group, Naomi proved that one person could indeed ignite a broader movement. Her journey from a professional consultant to a prominent voice for equality and justice illustrated how personal adversity could transform into a powerful force for communal benefit. She not only advocated for herself, but created a platform for others to share their experiences and feel validated. Naomi's story serves as a reminder that true empowerment lies not just in achieving justice for oneself, but in opening doors for others to do the same. Through her actions, she inspired a ripple effect, encouraging individuals everywhere to recognize their capacity to contribute to a more just and inclusive world. Her legacy is a powerful reminder that change often starts with one voice, but is sustained by the many who join it.